Sarah Jenkins pulled her car into the parking lot of Atlanta General Hospital on a crisp autumn morning, just like she had done for the past 5 years. The familiar scent of coffee drifted from her travel mug as she gathered her belongings, ready for another day as a rehabilitation nurse. Little did she know, this ordinary Tuesday would change her life forever. The hospital halls buzzed with the usual morning activities as Sarah checked her patient list at the nurse's station. Her colleague, Mary, rushed over with an urgent update. "Sarah, we have a new patient in room 415. He was transferred from intensive care last night." Sarah nodded, picking up the medical chart. The name Marcus Thompson stood out in bold letters, along with notes about a severe car accident 3 weeks ago that had left him paralyzed from the waist down. At 32 years old, the former high school basketball coach was facing the biggest challenge of his life. When Sarah entered room 415, she found Marcus staring out the window, his broad shoulders slumped forward in the hospital bed. The morning sunlight highlighted the healing cuts on his face, reminders of the accident that had turned his world upside down. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. I'm Sarah, and I'll be your primary nurse during your rehabilitation," she said warmly, moving closer to check his vital signs. Marcus turned to face her, and despite his situation, his brown eyes held a spark of life that caught Sarah off guard. "Please call me Marcus," he replied with a gentle smile that seemed to brighten the sterile hospital room. Over the next few hours, Sarah helped Marcus understand his rehabilitation schedule. She was impressed by his questions. They were thoughtful and showed he was ready to face his new reality head-on. Unlike many patients who felt angry or defeated, Marcus maintained a positive attitude that was rare to see. "You know what's funny?" Marcus said while Sarah helped him sit up for his first physical therapy session. "I used to tell my basketball players that life is like a game. Sometimes you need to change your strategy to win. I guess now I'm living that lesson." His words touched something deep inside Sarah. In her 5 years of nursing, she had never met someone who could find wisdom in such a difficult situation. As she guided him through the morning routine, they talked about everything from their favorite movies to their shared love of soul food. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah found herself looking forward to her shifts with Marcus. She admired how he pushed through every therapy session, even when pain painted his face with sweat. He never complained, not even once. Instead, he often made jokes that had the entire staff laughing. One rainy afternoon, while helping Marcus practice transfers from his bed to his wheelchair, he asked Sarah about her life outside the hospital. She told him about her dream of opening a small wellness center someday, combining traditional medicine with holistic healing practices. To her surprise, Marcus listened intently, asking questions and offering suggestions. "You know, Sarah," he said, adjusting himself in the wheelchair, "sometimes angels come disguised as nurses." His honest words made her blush, something that hadn't happened to her in years. The other nurses started to notice how Sarah spent extra time in room 415, how her face lit up when talking about Marcus's progress, and how she volunteered for extra shifts when he had difficult therapy sessions scheduled. Mary, her closest friend at work, finally confronted her in the break room. "Girl, I see what's happening," Mary said with a knowing smile. "You're falling for him, aren't you?" Sarah denied it at first, reminding herself of professional boundaries and the complications of getting involved with a patient. But deep down, she knew something special was growing between them. Marcus wasn't just another patient. He was becoming someone who made her heart beat faster every time she walked into his room. As Marcus's discharge date approached, Sarah felt both happy for his progress and sad about not seeing him every day. On his final day at the hospital, he handed her a small envelope. "Open it after I leave," he said, his eyes twinkling with that same spark she had noticed on their first meeting. Later that evening, Sarah opened the envelope to find a note that would start the next chapter of their story. "Thank you for helping me find strength I didn't know I had. Would you like to have coffee with me next week, this time as just Marcus and Sarah?" Sarah held the note close to her heart, knowing that sometimes the biggest blessings come in unexpected packages, and that this was just the beginning of something extraordinary. 1 week after Marcus left the hospital, Sarah sat nervously in the small coffee shop downtown, checking her watch every few minutes. She had changed her outfit 3 times before leaving home, finally settling on a simple yellow sundress that her mother always said brought out her smile. The bell above the door chimed, and Marcus wheeled himself in smoothly, looking different in casual clothes instead of hospital gowns. He had on a crisp blue button-down shirt and dark jeans, and his face lit up when he spotted Sarah at the corner table. "You look beautiful," Marcus said as he positioned his wheelchair at the table. "Much prettier than those hospital scrubs, though you looked good in those too." His easy charm made Sarah laugh, breaking the initial tension between them. They talked for hours that afternoon, losing track of time as they shared stories about their lives. Sarah learned that Marcus had grown up in a small town in Georgia, raised by his grandmother after losing his parents in a house fire. Despite the tragedy, he had worked hard to become a successful basketball coach, leading his team to 3 state championships before the accident. "What do your parents think about you having coffee with a former patient?" Marcus asked, stirring his second cup of coffee. Sarah's smile faded slightly. "They don't know yet," she admitted. "My family can be traditional. They have certain expectations about who I should date." Marcus nodded understanding. "Because I'm in a wheelchair?" "That, and—" Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. "Some people still have issues with interracial relationships." "Ah," Marcus said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Well, good thing I've never been one to let other people's issues become my problems." Over the next few months, Sarah and Marcus's relationship grew stronger. They went on creative dates that Marcus planned carefully, considering his wheelchair accessibility. They enjoyed outdoor movies in the park, visited museums during quiet hours, and even tried adaptive cooking classes together. However, not everyone supported their blossoming romance. Sarah's parents, James and Dorothy Jenkins, were shocked when she finally told them about Marcus. Her father, a retired military officer, worried about his daughter's future with a disabled man. Her mother fretted about what their church friends would say about their daughter dating outside their race. "Sarah, honey," her mother said during a tense Sunday dinner, "we just want what's best for you. Being the caregiver to a disabled husband, that's a huge responsibility." "Mom, Marcus isn't looking for a caregiver," Sarah replied firmly. "He's independent, strong, and makes me happier than I've ever been. Why can't you see that?" Marcus faced his own challenges. Some of his friends questioned whether Sarah truly loved him or if she was just feeling sorry for him. His younger sister, Tanya, worried that Sarah might leave him when things got tough. But Marcus and Sarah faced these challenges together. They attended family gatherings where Sarah charmed Marcus's relatives with her warmth and sincerity. She stood proud beside his wheelchair at his former school's basketball games, where his old team still considered him their coach emeritus. Gradually, things began to change. Sarah's mother saw how Marcus made her daughter laugh, something she hadn't heard much since Sarah's college days. Her father witnessed Marcus's determination during physical therapy sessions, recognizing the same kind of strength he'd valued in his military days. One evening, after a particularly successful dinner with both families, Marcus wheeled alongside Sarah in the parking lot. "You know what I love about you," he said, stopping under a streetlight. "You see me, not my wheelchair. You've never once made me feel less than whole." Sarah knelt down beside his wheelchair, taking both his hands in hers. "And you've never once made me feel like I had to choose between my family's expectations and my heart." As they sat there, hands intertwined under the soft glow of the streetlight, they knew they were breaking more than just barriers. They were building a bridge to a future where love truly had no boundaries. What they didn't realize yet was that this was just the beginning of their journey together, and the biggest challenges and surprises were still to come. 6 months into their relationship, Marcus started acting mysterious. Sarah noticed him having hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when she entered the room, and he seemed distracted during their regular Friday night movie dates. As a nurse, Sarah's mind immediately went to the worst possibilities. Was he having health complications he hadn't told her about? What Sarah didn't know was that Marcus had been secretly working with the staff at Atlanta General Hospital, planning something that would change both their lives forever. He remembered exactly where he had first fallen in love with her, in room 415, where her kindness and strength had given him hope during his darkest days. On a sunny Saturday morning, Sarah got an urgent call from Mary, her colleague at the hospital. "Sarah, honey, we need you to come in right away. There's an emergency with a former patient." Sarah's heart raced as she drove to the hospital, her mind filled with worry. When she rushed through the hospital doors in her casual weekend clothes instead of her usual scrubs, She found Mary waiting at the front desk with a strange smile on her face. "Follow me," Mary said, heading toward the rehabilitation wing. Sarah noticed something odd. The usually busy hallways were quiet, and familiar faces kept peeking out of doorways, quickly disappearing when she looked their way. As they approached room 415, Sarah heard soft music playing. Mary stopped at the door, handed Sarah a single red rose, and gently pushed her inside. Sarah gasped at what she saw. The room had been transformed. Gone were the standard hospital beds and medical equipment. Instead, hundreds of twinkling lights hung from the ceiling, creating a warm glow. Photos of Sarah and Marcus were strung along the walls, documenting their journey together. Their first coffee date, holiday celebrations, family gatherings, and quiet moments they'd shared. In the center of the room sat Marcus in his wheelchair, wearing a suit and the biggest smile Sarah had ever seen. Behind him stood both their families, Sarah's parents, who now looked at Marcus with genuine affection, and Marcus's sister Tanya, who was trying hard not to cry. "Sarah Jenkins," Marcus began, his voice strong and clear, "this room might seem like a strange place for this moment, but this is where my life truly began again. Not just because I started my recovery here, but because this is where I met the woman who would show me that love doesn't see barriers, it breaks them down." He wheeled forward, reaching for her hand. "In this room, you showed me that my wheelchair doesn't define me. You taught me that true strength isn't about being able to walk. It's about being able to keep moving forward, no matter what." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as Marcus continued. "Every day since then, you've shown me what real love looks like. You've stood by me through physical therapy sessions, family doubts, and societal judgments. You've never once made me feel like I was anything less than the man you deserve." Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. With steady hands, he opened it to reveal a beautiful diamond ring. "So now, in this room where our story began, I'm asking you to write the next chapter with me." The machines in the nearby rooms beeped softly as Marcus took a deep breath and said, "Sarah Jenkins, will you marry me?" Sarah's hands trembled as she looked at the man before her, the man who had shown her what courage looked like, who had helped her stand up for what she believed in, who had loved her completely and without reservation. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, yes, yes." The room erupted in cheers as Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger. Hospital staff who had been watching from the hallway burst in, bringing with them cake and champagne they'd been hiding at the nurse's station. Sarah's mother hugged Marcus, whispering, "Welcome to the family, son." Her father shook Marcus's hand firmly, pride evident in his eyes. Tanya wrapped Sarah in a tight embrace, officially welcoming her as a sister. As Sarah looked around the room at their unlikely gathering, nurses, doctors, family members, all celebrating together in the very place where their love story began, she realized that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from embracing the unexpected. Marcus reached up to wipe a tear from her cheek, his eyes shining with joy. "Ready for our next adventure?" he asked softly. Sarah leaned down to kiss him, knowing that this was just the beginning of their greatest journey together. The excitement of the engagement quickly gave way to the reality of planning a wedding that would accommodate everyone's needs. Sarah and Marcus sat at their kitchen table, surrounded by bridal magazines and venue brochures, quickly realizing this wouldn't be like planning a typical wedding. "This venue looks perfect," Sarah said one evening, showing Marcus a picture of a beautiful historic church. Her face fell as she noticed the steep steps leading to the entrance. "Oh, never mind. I didn't see the stairs." Marcus wheeled closer to her, taking the magazine from her hands. "Hey, don't get discouraged. We'll find the right place. Remember what I always say. Life is like a game. Sometimes you need to change your strategy to win," Sarah repeated with a smile, leaning down to kiss his cheek. Their first real challenge came when visiting wedding venues. Many places that claimed to be wheelchair accessible only had basic ramps, with narrow doorways or bathrooms that wouldn't work for Marcus. Some venue owners looked uncomfortable when they arrived, their eyes darting between Marcus's wheelchair and Sarah's hand holding his. One venue manager even pulled Sarah aside and whispered, "Are you sure you want to go through with this? It's not too late to have a normal wedding." Sarah's response was quick and firm. "Our love is normal. If you can't see that, we'll take our business elsewhere." She walked out holding her head high, pushing Marcus's wheelchair with pride. Their breakthrough came when they discovered a modern event center by the lake. The owner, Mrs. Rodriguez, greeted them with genuine warmth. Her own son used a wheelchair, she explained, so she had renovated the entire building to be truly accessible. "Look at this dance floor, Sarah," Marcus exclaimed, wheeling smoothly across the spacious hardwood floor. "And the backdrop of the lake for our photos will be perfect." Mrs. Rodriguez showed them the specially designed bathroom facilities, the wide aisles, and even a gently sloping aisle for the ceremony. "Love shouldn't have barriers," she said simply, making both Sarah and Marcus tear up. The next challenge was finding wedding attire. While Sarah enjoyed traditional dress shopping with her mother and bridesmaids, Marcus faced difficulties finding a suit that would look good while sitting in his wheelchair. They finally found a talented tailor who specialized in adaptive clothing. "We'll design the suit to look perfect while you're seated," the tailor explained, taking careful measurements. "And we'll add discreet openings for any medical devices you might need." Their families helped in their own ways. Sarah's father, who had initially struggled with their relationship, spent weekends helping to build temporary ramps at various locations for the wedding events. Marcus's sister Tanya, a graphic designer, created beautiful wedding invitations featuring a supple wheelchair heart design that made both Sarah and Marcus cry when they saw it. One evening, while reviewing their wedding plans, Marcus noticed Sarah looking worried. "What's on your mind, beautiful?" he asked, reaching for her hand. "I've been thinking about our first dance," Sarah admitted. "I want it to be special, but I don't want you to feel uncomfortable." Marcus grinned mysteriously. "Actually, I've been taking some dance lessons with my physical therapist. Trust me, our first dance will be unforgettable." As the wedding date grew closer, Sarah and Marcus found themselves surrounded by support they hadn't expected. Their wedding registry was filled with both traditional gifts and items that would make their married life more accessible. Friends and family members took classes to learn how to properly assist someone in a wheelchair, wanting to ensure their wedding day would run smoothly. The most touching moment came when Sarah's elderly grandmother called a family meeting. Everyone expected her to voice concerns about the wedding. Instead, she announced she would be taking dance lessons so she could participate in a special wheelchair dance with Marcus at the reception. "In my 90 years," she declared, "I've learned that love is love, and these two have more love than most people I've known." As Sarah and Marcus finalized their wedding plans, they realized that every challenge they'd faced had only made their bond stronger. Their wedding wouldn't be traditional, but it would be perfectly them. "You know what?" Sarah said one night as they watched the sunset from their porch. "I wouldn't want our wedding any other way." Marcus squeezed her hand, knowing that their unique journey was what made their love story so special. As the wedding day approached, both families decided to hold a big Sunday dinner to bring everyone closer together. Sarah's mother Dorothy hosted the gathering at her house, nervously arranging and rearranging the furniture to ensure Marcus could move around easily in his wheelchair. The afternoon started awkwardly, with both families sitting on opposite sides of the living room. Marcus's grandmother, May, sat quietly observing everyone while holding her famous sweet potato pie. Sarah's younger brother Michael kept checking his phone, unsure how to break the ice. "Well," Dorothy said, standing in the middle of the room, "I suppose we should get to know each other better, since we're going to be family soon." Her voice shook slightly, but she was trying her best to make everyone feel welcome. Marcus's sister Tanya noticed Dorothy's hands trembling as she poured tea and stepped in to help. As they worked together in the kitchen, Tanya shared stories about Marcus's childhood, making Dorothy laugh with tales of his failed attempts at cooking. "You know," Tanya said while arranging cookies on a plate, "I was worried about Marcus after the accident, but since meeting Sarah, I've seen my brother smile more than he has in years." Dorothy wiped her eyes with her apron. "Sarah's different too," she admitted. "She's stronger, more confident. Your brother helped her find her voice." In the living room, Sarah's father James was having an unexpected conversation with Marcus about basketball strategies. As a former high school basketball player himself, James found himself drawn into Marcus's passionate discussion about coaching techniques. "The game isn't just about physical ability," Marcus explained, his eyes lighting up. "It's about strategy, heart, and determination. That's what I always taught my players." James nodded thoughtfully, beginning to see why his daughter had fallen in love with this man. It wasn't about what Marcus couldn't do. It was about everything he could do and the way he approached life's challenges. Meanwhile, Grandma May had moved to sit next to Marcus's grandmother. The two elderly women discovered they both loved quilting and had strong opinions about how young people today didn't appreciate handmade things anymore. Soon they were exchanging phone numbers and making plans to start a quilting project together for the newlyweds. The afternoon took an emotional turn when Marcus's young nephew Tommy asked an innocent question during dinner. "Aunt Sarah," he said between bites of macaroni and cheese, "why do some people at my school say it's weird that you're marrying Uncle Marcus?" The room fell silent. Sarah looked at Marcus, who squeezed her hand under the table. "Sometimes, Tommy," Sarah replied carefully, "people don't understand that love isn't about what someone looks like or whether they can walk. Love is about how someone makes you feel, how they treat others, and the way they make the world a better place." Dorothy surprised everyone by adding, "And your Uncle Marcus makes our Sarah very happy. That's all that matters to this family now." Marcus's mother wiped tears from her eyes, reaching across the table to hold Dorothy's hand. The two women who had once been uncertain about their children's relationship now found themselves united in their support. As the evening wound down, both families gathered in the backyard. Michael had set up an old projector, and they watched home videos of both Sarah and Marcus growing up. They laughed at Marcus's first basketball game, where he scored for the wrong team, and Sarah's awkward middle school dance recital. "Look at that," James said softly to his wife, watching Sarah and Marcus surrounded by their blended family, all laughing together. "Remember when we thought this would never work?" Dorothy squeezed his hand, watching as Marcus showed Tommy how to do wheelies in his wheelchair while Sarah spotted them carefully. "We were wrong about so many things," she admitted. Before everyone left, both families gathered for a photo. There was some chaos as they tried to arrange everyone. Marcus's wheelchair in the center, Sarah beside him, grandmothers insisting on being next to each other, children squeezed in front. The resulting picture wasn't perfect, but it captured something beautiful. Two families becoming one, despite their differences. As Sarah and Marcus left that evening, they felt a weight lift from their shoulders. Their families hadn't just accepted their relationship, they had embraced it, creating a new kind of normal that was uniquely their own. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, with sunlight streaming through the windows of the Lakeside Event Center. Sarah stood in the bridal suite, surrounded by her bridesmaids, her hands shaking slightly as her mother helped her into her wedding dress. "Something old," Dorothy said, pinning her own mother's pearl brooch to Sarah's dress. "Something new," she continued, adjusting the flowing white gown that had been specially designed to look beautiful whether Sarah was standing or kneeling beside Marcus's wheelchair. Tanya, now both Marcus's sister and Sarah's closest friend, stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "Something borrowed," she said, fastening her grandmother's bracelet around Sarah's wrist. "And something blue," Mary, her colleague from the hospital, added, revealing a delicate blue garter. Meanwhile, in the groom's room, Marcus was getting ready with help from Sarah's brother Michael and his old basketball team members. They had all come wearing matching ties with small wheelchair symbols embroidered on them, a surprise they planned for months. "Looking sharp, Coach," his former team captain said, helping Marcus with his bow tie. Marcus smiled, remembering how these same players had visited him every day in the hospital after his accident. Now they were here, on the biggest day of his life. The ceremony space looked magical. Mrs. Rodriguez, the venue owner, had outdone herself. The aisle was wide and smooth, perfect for Marcus's wheelchair. White and purple flowers lined the path, and soft fabric draped from the ceiling created an intimate atmosphere. The lake sparkled behind the altar, providing a perfect backdrop. As guests arrived, they noticed thoughtful details everywhere. The program included a beautiful note explaining why certain traditional elements might look different, celebrating how Marcus and Sarah had created their own unique way of expressing their love. Each row had space for wheelchairs, making sure all guests with mobility needs felt welcomed. Sarah's grandmother and Marcus's grandmother sat together in the front row, holding hands and dabbing at their eyes. They wore matching corsages they had made together during their quilting sessions. Behind them, hospital staff from the rehabilitation ward sat alongside Marcus's former basketball players and their families. The music began to play, not the traditional wedding march, but a soft jazz piece that Marcus and Sarah had chosen together. The wedding party made their way down the aisle, each person beaming with joy. Then Marcus appeared at the altar, having chosen to wheel himself down the aisle first. He wore a handsome black suit tailored perfectly for his seated position, with a purple boutonniere matching Sarah's bouquet. A collective gasp filled the room as Sarah appeared at the entrance. Her dress flowed beautifully around her, with delicate beading that caught the light. But it was her smile that captivated everyone, pure joy radiating from her face as she looked at Marcus waiting for her. James, Sarah's father, took her arm proudly. Before they began walking, he whispered, "I was wrong about him, honey. You chose well." Sarah squeezed his arm, too emotional to speak. As they moved down the aisle, Sarah saw familiar faces everywhere. Mary from the hospital wiped away tears. Mrs. Rodriguez stood at the back, beaming with pride at how perfectly everything had come together. Even the gruff venue manager who had once discouraged them had come, looking somewhat ashamed but genuinely moved by the scene before him. When they reached Marcus, James kissed Sarah's cheek and then did something unexpected. He hugged Marcus tightly, whispering "Welcome to the family, son" loud enough for the front rows to hear. Sarah took her place beside Marcus, automatically adjusting her dress so it draped perfectly around his wheelchair. The gesture was so natural, so full of love, that several guests began crying again. The minister smiled at the couple before addressing the gathering. "We are here today to witness not just the union of two people, but the triumph of love over every obstacle, every doubt, and every challenge. Sarah and Marcus have shown us that true love knows no boundaries." As the ceremony began, Sarah and Marcus held hands, their fingers intertwined tightly. They had created something beautiful together, not despite their differences, but because of them, and as the minister began their vows, both knew that the best was yet to come. The wedding reception began as the sun started to set over the lake, casting a golden glow through the venue's large windows. The space had been transformed with twinkling lights, purple and white flowers, and tables arranged in a way that made it easy for Marcus to navigate between them in his wheelchair. "Ladies and gentlemen," the DJ announced, "please welcome for the first time Mr. and Mrs. Marcus and Sarah Thompson." The crowd erupted in applause as the newlyweds entered, Marcus wheeling himself while Sarah walked beside him, one hand resting gently on his shoulder. The first surprise of the evening came during dinner. Marcus's former basketball team had prepared a video tribute. On the large screen, they showed clips of Marcus coaching, including the state championship game they'd won under his leadership. The video ended with recent footage of Marcus helping coach from his wheelchair, proving that his accident hadn't diminished his ability to inspire others. "Coach Thompson taught us that limitations are just challenges waiting to be overcome," his team captain said, raising his glass. "And Sarah, you've shown us that love sees no limitations at all." Sarah's father stood up next for his speech, his hands trembling slightly as he held his notes. "When Sarah first told us about Marcus, I'm ashamed to admit I only saw what I thought he couldn't do," James began honestly. "But Marcus showed me something important. That strength isn't about walking or running. It's about how you face life's challenges and how you love others. Today, I'm proud to call him my son." Dorothy, Sarah's mother, couldn't finish her speech because she was crying too hard, but everyone understood when she simply hugged both Sarah and Marcus, whispering, "My beautiful children." The moment everyone had been waiting for arrived, the first dance. The dance floor had been cleared, and guests gathered around, curious to see how the couple would handle this traditional moment. The opening notes of "At Last" by Etta James filled the room. What happened next left everyone speechless. Marcus had been secretly practicing with his physical therapist and Sarah's brother. Using a special attachment to his wheelchair that helped him move smoothly, he began to guide Sarah in a carefully choreographed dance. Sarah followed his lead perfectly, sometimes standing, sometimes sitting in his lap, their movements flowing together as if they'd been dancing this way forever. "He's been practicing for months," Tanya whispered to the amazed guests nearby. He wanted to show Sarah that they could still share every special moment together. After their dance, other couples joined them on the floor. Marcus's grandmother danced with Sarah's grandfather, while both mothers hugged and swayed together, all barriers between the families long forgotten. Even some of Marcus's former basketball players took turns dancing in wheelchairs borrowed from Mrs. Rodriguez's collection, wanting to share in Marcus's perspective. The party continued with more surprises. The hospital staff who had cared for Marcus performed a funny skit about how obvious it was that Sarah had fallen for him during his rehabilitation. Mary revealed that they had started a betting pool about when Marcus would propose, with Mrs. Rodriguez winning by guessing the exact day. Later in the evening, Sarah's brother Michael called everyone's attention. "We have a special presentation," he announced. On the screen appeared photos of Sarah and Marcus's journey, their first meeting in the hospital, casual dates in the park, family gatherings, and quiet moments they'd shared. The final photo showed them in front of room 415, where their story had begun. As the reception wound down, guests began to notice something remarkable. Throughout the entire celebration, neither Sarah nor Marcus had mentioned his disability once. It wasn't because they were ignoring it, it was because it truly didn't matter. They had created their own way of doing things, their own kind of normal. The night ended with all the guests holding sparklers, forming an illuminated path as Sarah and Marcus made their way to their decorated car. Just before they left, Marcus pulled Sarah onto his lap, spinning his wheelchair in a perfect circle as she laughed with joy. "Ready for our next adventure, Mrs. Thompson?" Marcus asked, his eyes shining with love and mischief. Sarah kissed him softly. "With you, always." As they departed amid cheers and well wishes, their families watched with pride, knowing that this was just the beginning of their beautiful journey together. But none of them could have predicted the incredible surprise that was still to come. As the wedding reception reached its final hour, Marcus whispered something to his sister Tanya, who quickly gathered their closest family members and friends. Sarah noticed people clustering around them, but assumed it was for the traditional farewell. "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice filled with emotion, "there's something I've been keeping from you." The room grew quiet as he continued. "For the past 8 months, while we were planning our wedding, I've been working on something special." Sarah's heart skipped a beat, wondering what her new husband could have been hiding all this time. She watched as Marcus's physical therapist, Dr. Chen, stepped forward with something she hadn't seen before, a pair of specialized leg braces. With Dr. Chen's help, Marcus explained, his voice shaking slightly, "I've been learning to take steps again. The accident didn't completely sever my spinal cord, and with new medical technology and intensive therapy, I've made progress I never thought possible." Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she watched Michael and Dr. Chen help attach the braces to Marcus's legs. The room was so quiet you could hear the soft whirring of the mechanical supports as they locked into place. "I wanted to wait for this moment," Marcus continued, "because this isn't just about me walking. It's about us taking our first steps into our new life together." With careful movements, Marcus gripped the handles of his wheelchair. Dr. Chen stood ready on one side, Michael on the other. The guests formed a circle around them, everyone holding their breath. Slowly, steadily, Marcus began to push himself up. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth as she watched her husband rise from the wheelchair that had been part of their entire relationship. His legs trembled with effort, but his face showed pure determination. "The doctors said I might never stand again," Marcus said, now at his full height, supported by the braces. "But they didn't know I had something worth standing for." Sarah's mother clutched her father's arm, both of them crying openly. Marcus's grandmother gripped her chair tightly, prayers of thanks whispered under her breath. Tanya recorded everything on her phone, her hands shaking with emotion. Then Marcus did something that no one expected. Still supported by the braces, he took one step forward. The mechanical supports whirred softly as he moved. Another step followed, slow but steady. The distance between him and Sarah began to close. "Oh my God," Mary whispered from somewhere in the crowd. "He's walking." 3 steps, that's what Marcus had promised himself he would take on his wedding day. 3 steps toward his new wife, 3 steps into their future together. Each one was a triumph of determination, love, and countless hours of secret therapy sessions. When he reached Sarah, Marcus stood before her, tears streaming down his face. "You've stood by me through everything," he said. "Now I wanted to stand for you." Sarah, overwhelmed with emotion, threw her arms around him. They held each other, standing together for the first time since they'd met. The room erupted in applause and cheers, many guests openly sobbing at witnessing this incredible moment. "How?" Sarah finally managed to ask through her tears. "How did you do this without me knowing?" Marcus smiled. "Remember all those extra physical therapy sessions? The ones I said were for strengthening my arms. Well, I had some help keeping the secret." He glanced around at their friends and family, who had all played a part in keeping this surprise. "Those aren't just any braces. Dr. Chen explained to Sarah. Their new technology, and Marcus worked harder than any patient I've ever had to learn to use them. He wanted this moment to be perfect for you. Sarah looked at her husband with new understanding. All those mysterious appointments, the times he'd seemed extra tired, the private conversations with Dr. Chen, it all made sense now. This doesn't change anything, Marcus said softly to Sarah. I'm still me, and I'll still use my wheelchair most of the time. But now, sometimes I can stand beside you, dance with you, walk with you. It's just another way I can show you how much I love you. Sarah kissed him tenderly, not caring about the mascara running down her cheeks. You've always stood tall in my eyes, she whispered. Wheelchair or not, you're the strongest man I know. As they held each other, surrounded by the love and joy of their families, they knew that this was more than just a surprise ending to their wedding. It was the beginning of a lifetime of overcoming obstacles together, proving that with love, determination, and faith in each other, anything was possible.